JATAKA. The king of Bru, etc. This story the master told while staying at Jetavana monastery, about the king of Kosala. Now we read that magnificent presents were made to the Lord Buddha and his company, and they were held in great respect, as it is written. At that time the Lord Buddha was honored and revered, respected, reverenced, highly esteemed, and received rich presents, robes, food, lodgment, drugs and medicines, and provisions. And the brotherhood was honored, etc. But the pilgrims of heterodox schools were not honored, etc. Well, those in other sects, finding that honor and gifts diminished, convened a secret meeting for deliberation. Since the appearance of the elder monk Gautam, they said, honor and gifts come no more to us, but he has got the best of both. What can be the reason of his good fortune? Then one of them spoke as follows. Elder monk Gautam has the best and highest place in all India to live in, and that is the reason of his success. Then the others said, if this is the reason, we will make a rival settlement above Jetavana monastery, and then we shall receive presents. This was the conclusion they came to. But, thought they, if we make our settlement unknown to the king, the brethren will prevent us. If he accepts a present, he will not be disinclined to break up their settlement. So we had best bribe him to give us a place for ours. So by the intervention of his courtiers, they offered 100,000 pieces to the king, with this message. Great king, we want to make a rival settlement in Jetavana monastery. If the brethren tell you they won't permit it, please do not give them any answer. To this the king agreed, because he wanted the bribe. After thus appeasing the king, the schemers got an architect and put the work in hand. There was a good deal of noise about it. What is all this great noise and uproar, Ananda? The master asked. The noise, said he, is some of those in other sects who are having a new settlement built. That is not a fit place, he replied, for them to settle. These of other sects are fond of noise. There's no living with them. Then he called the brotherhood together, and asked them to go inform the king, and have the building put a stop to. The brethren went and stood by the palace door. The king, as soon as he heard of their coming, knew they must be come about stopping the new settlement. But he had been bribed, and so he ordered his attendants to say the king was not at home. The brethren went back and told the master. The master guessed that a bribe had been given, and sent his 2 chief disciples. But the king, as soon as he heard of their coming, gave the same order as before. And they too returned and told the master. The master said, doubtless the king is not able to stay at home today. He must be out. Next forenoon, he dressed himself, took his bowl and robe, and with 500 brethren walked to the door of the palace. The king heard them come. He descended from the upper story, and took from the Buddha his alms bowl. Then he gave rice and porridge to him and his followers, and with a salutation sat down on one side. The master began an exposition for the king's benefit, in these words. Great king, other kings in bygone days have taken bribes, and then by making virtuous people quarrel together have been dispossessed of their kingdom, and been utterly destroyed. And then, at his request, the master told an old world tale. Once upon a time, King Bru was reigning over the kingdom of Bru. At the same time the Bodhisattva was teacher of a troop of monks. He was an ascetic who had acquired the 5 supernatural faculties and the 8 attainments. And he lived a long time in the region of Himalaya. He came down from Himalaya to buy salt and spices, followed by 500 ascetics. And they came by stages to the city of Bru. He went for begging through the city. And then coming on from it, he sat down by the northern gate, at the root of a banyan tree all covered with twigs and branches. There he made a meal, and there he took up his dwelling. Now when that band of hermits had lived there by the space of half a moon, there came another teacher with another 500, who went seeking alms about the city, and then came out and sat beneath just such another banyan tree by the south gate, and ate, and lived there. and the two bands dwelling there so long as they would, and then returned again to Himalaya. When they had gone, the tree by the south gate withered away. Next time, they who had lived under it came first, and perceiving that their tree was withered, they first went on their rounds throughout the city, seeking alms, and then passing out by the northern gate, they ate and dwelling under the banyan tree that was by that gate. And the other band, coming afterwards, went their rounds in the city, and then made ready their meal and would have lived by their own tree. This is not your tree, it is ours, they cried. And they began to quarrel about the tree. The quarrel grew great. These said, Take not the place where we lived formerly. And those, This time are we first come. Do not you take it? So crying aloud each that they were the owners of it, they all went to the king's palace. The king decreed that they who had first lived there should hold it. Then the others thought, We will not allow ourselves to say that we have been beaten by these. They looked about then with divine vision. And observing the body of a chariot fit for an emperor to use, they took it and offered it as a gift to the king, begging him to give them to possession of the tree. He took their gift, and decreed that both should dwell under the tree. And so they were there all masters together. Then the other hermits fetched the jeweled wheels of the same chariot, and offered them to the king, praying him, O mighty king, make it to possess the tree alone. And the king did so. Then the ascetics repented, and said, To think that we, who have overcome the love of riches and the lust of the flesh, and have renounced the world, should fall to quarreling by reason of a tree, and offer bribes for it. This is no seemly thing. And they went away in all haste till they came to Himalaya. And all the spirits that lived in the realm of Bru with one minor were angry with the king. And they brought up the sea, and for the space of 300 leagues they made the kingdom of Bru as though it were not. And so for the sake of the king of Bru alone, all the inhabitants of the kingdom perished thus. When the teacher had ended this tale, in his perfect wisdom, he uttered the following stanzas. The king of Bru, as old stories say, made holy hermits quarrel on a day. For the which sin it fell that he fell dead, and with him all his kingdom perished. For which reason the wise do not approve at all when that desire into the heart did fall. He that is free from deceit, whose heart is pure, all that he says is ever true and sure. When the master had ended this story, he added, Great king, one should not be under the power of desire. Two religious persons should not quarrel together. Then he identified the birth. In those days, I was the leader of the sages. When the king had entertained the Buddha, and he had departed, the king sent some men and had the rival settlement destroyed, and those of other sects became ascetic. JATAKA number 214. Punnanati JATAKA. That which can drink, etc. This story the master told while staying at Jetavana monastery, about perfect wisdom. On one occasion, the brethren were gathered in the hall of truth, talking of the Buddha's wisdom. Friend, the Supreme Buddha's wisdom is great, and wide, cutting, and quick, sharp, penetrating, and full of resource. The master came in, and asked what they talked of as they sat there together. They told him. Not now only, said he, is the Buddha wise and resourceful. He was so in days of past. And then he told them a story. Once upon a time, while Brahmadatta was king of Benares, the Bodhisattva came into the world as the son of the court priest. When he grew up, he studied at Taxila. And at his father's death he received the office of priest, and he was the king's advisor in things human and divine. Afterwards the king opened his ear to some conspirators, and in anger told the Bodhisattva to dwell before his face no more, and sent him away from Benares. So he took his wife and family with him, and dwelling in a certain village of Kasi. Afterward the king remembered his goodness, and said to himself, It is not right that I should send a messenger to fetch my teacher. I will compose a verse of poetry, and write it upon a leaf. I will cause crow's flesh to be cooked. And after I have tied up letter and meat in a white cloth, I will seal it with the king's seal, and send it to him. If he is wise, when he has read the letter and seen that it is crow's meat, he will come. If not, then he will not come. And so he wrote on the leaf this stanza. That which can drink when rivers are in flood. That which the corn will cover out of sight. That which foretells a traveler on the road, O wise one, eat. My riddle read properly. This verse did the king write upon a leaf, and sent it to the Bodhisattva. He read the letter, and thinking the king wishes to see me, he repeated the second verse. The king does not forget to send me crow, geese, herons, peacocks, other birds there are. If he gives one, he'll give the rest, I know. If he sent none at all, it was worse far. Then he caused his vehicle to be made ready, and went, and looked upon the king. And the king, being pleased, set him again in the place of the king's priest. This discourse ended, the master identified the birth. Ananda was the king in those days, and I was his priest. JATAKA number 215. Kakapa JATAKA. The tortoise needs must speak, etc. This is a story told by the master while staying in Jetavana monastery, about Khuddaka. The circumstances which gave rise to it will be set on under the Mahatakari birth. Here again the master said. This is not the only time, brethren, that Khuddaka has been ruined by talking. It was the same before. And then he told the story as follows. Once upon a time Brahmadatta was king of Benares, and the Bodhisattva, being born to one of the king's court, grew up, and became the king's advisor in all things human and divine. But this king was very talkative. And when he talked there was no chance for any other to get in a word. And the Bodhisattva, wishing to put a stop to his much talking, kept watching for an opportunity. Now there lived a tortoise in a certain pond in the region of Himalaya. Two young wild geese, searching for food, struck up an acquaintance with him. And in due course they grew close friends together. One day these two said to him, Friend Tortoise, we have a lovely home in Himalaya, on a plateau of Mount Khuddaka, in a cave of gold. Will you come with us? Why, said he, how can I get there? Oh, we will take you, if only you can keep your mouth shut, and say not a word to anybody. Yes, I can do that, says he. Take me along. So they made the tortoise hold a stick between his teeth. And themselves taking hold so of the two ends, they sprang up into the air. The village children saw this, and exclaimed, there are two geese carrying a tortoise by a stick. By this time the geese flying swiftly had arrived at the space above the palace of the king, at Benares. The tortoise wanted to cry out, well, and if my friends do carry me, what is that to you, you dullards? And he let go the stick from between his teeth, and falling into the open courtyard he split in two. What an uproar there was! A tortoise has fallen in the courtyard, and broken in two. They cried. The king, with the Bodhisattva, and all his court, came up to the place, and seeing the tortoise asked the Bodhisattva a question. Wise sir, what made this creature fall? Now's my time, thought he. For a long while I have been wishing to advise the king, and I have gone about seeking my opportunity. No doubt the truth is this. The tortoise and the geese became friendly. The geese must have meant to carry him to Himalaya, and so made him hold a stick between his teeth, and then lifted him into the air. Then he must have heard some remark, and wanted to reply. And not being able to keep his mouth shut he must have let himself go. And so he must have fallen from the sky and thus come by his death. So thought he. And addressed the king. O king, they that have too much tongue, that set no limit to their speaking, ever come to such misfortune as this. And he uttered the following verses. The tortoise needs must speak aloud, although between his teeth a stick he bit. Yet, spite of it, he spoke and fell beneath. And now, O mighty master, know it well. See you speak wisely, see you speak in season. To death the tortoise fell. He talked too much. That was the reason. He is speaking of me. The king thought to himself. And asked the Bodhisattva if it was so. Be it you, O great king, or be it another, replied he, whosoever talks beyond measure comes by some misery of this kind. And so he made the thing manifest. And from then the king abstained from talking, and became a man of few words. This discourse ended, the master identified the birth Khuddaka was the tortoise then, the two famous elders were the two wild geese, Ananda was the king, and I was his wise adviser.